In this edition of reShape 333, I want to talk about an issue that has the potential of creating perhaps a little bit of awkwardness, at least initially. But it's a topic that smart churches and smart leaders are addressing, both because of short-term possibilities that can arise, as well as long-term realities that will most certainly come. It's an important issue, and I want to talk about it in the next 333 seconds. So let's get at it. I served as the pastor of Atlantic Community Church for 20 years, but honestly, I was an interim pastor. I have a friend who's been serving in one church for his entire ministry. He started in his 20s, now he's approaching retirement. But hear me, he's an interim pastor as well. Every pastor is an interim. The church has existed for over 2,000 years. Pastors and leaders have come before us, and because it's not done yet, we all have someone who is going to lead after us. Every pastor, every senior leader is an interim. In fact, the truth is this: Jesus was an interim pastor. He was an interim leader. He knew that was true. And so from the very beginning, when he arrived on the scene, he started to plan for that. He started implementing this kingdom succession plan for when he was gone. He built the team. He trained the team. And in fact, the team assumed leadership far more quickly than they ever would have thought or anticipated or perhaps even wanted. Because this is true, every pastor and leadership team needs to begin conversations around leadership transitions and possibly succession. And they need to do it sooner than later because it's coming. Even if it's 20 years out, we know that it's coming. So the question is, have you considered a plan for that possible scenario? If one thing is true during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's that the fragility of life and the brevity of life are even more certain realities in our minds. And COVID has exposed how so many churches during that period of time were centered on the leadership of perhaps only one or two. Perhaps the conversation around transition and succession is not the elephant in the room that maybe it once was. And so whether it's a team or whether you're a solo pastor, how do we begin to think about that? And how do we begin to broaden and strengthen our leadership base for the future health of the church and the transition and succession that is directly in front of us at some point? So I want to encourage you to begin a conversation, and let's frame the conversation around this statement. Here it is. Every church needs a spare and an heir. Let's break that down. Every church needs a spare. Who will assume leadership of the congregation if an unexpected season arises, and what will that look like? Perhaps a pastor has a health issue, or perhaps that pastor takes a sabbatical for 3 or 4 months, or maybe there's a family crisis. But what if the pastor has to step out for a season? Who will lead? How will you make that process as seamless as possible? And how will you prepare now for that leadership possibility then? What questions are the questions that need to be answered? Perhaps an associate pastor can step in. Perhaps the leadership team can step up. But what is the plan so the church is not caught off guard and has some clear steps in place? We all know the Apostle Paul's instruction for the church is that we equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Most churches understand the need to create teams and to create spares to help when it comes to leading in children's ministry or youth ministry or with their food banks. Leaders in those areas often transition. But what if the senior leader has to step away for a chapter? Have we prepared well for that possibility? And secondly, every church needs what we can call an heir. Since every pastor is an interim, every church will be looking for a new pastor eventually. Wise churches and wise leadership teams begin that process early. Perhaps you're not anticipating that to happen for another 5 years or 10 years, or maybe happening in another 20 years. But sometimes situations can change overnight. So pastor, if you're planning for your succession, what would you want to take place in order that the church could continue strong? Because I know that's what you want to see happen. And to the leadership team, can you paint an ideal picture of what succession might look like in order that the church would continue strong during that transition period from one pastor to the next pastor? You see, the process isn't easy. The conversation, in fact, could be a little bit awkward at first. It will be unpredictable and probably will take more time than you can ever imagine. But for the sake of the church, these are challenging conversations that really need to happen, and they will produce long-term health. And the earlier you begin, the greater the likelihood of success. These 333 seconds are simply putting this important topic on your radar. And I want to give you a couple of prompter questions for you to have conversation around. And plus, at the end, I've listed a resource that will provide a more in-depth pathway for you as you begin these conversations. Remember, every church needs a spare and every church needs an heir. Have fun thinking and discussing this topic. And if this 333 piece is helpful, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel, maybe give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thanks, everyone.